I'll never forget when I heard my son-in-law say, "Just suck it now. Put your mouth right here." Those words still ring in my ears clear as day, even though it's been almost a year since that night. It was around 2 a.m., pitch dark outside with just a sliver of moonlight cutting through the kitchen window of our farmhouse. I'd woken up with a dry throat that wouldn't quit, so I shuffled down the hallway for some water, trying not to wake anybody. Our old floorboards have a mind of their own, creaking and complaining with every step, no matter how light you try to be. I was halfway to the kitchen when I heard it. Richard's voice, coming from behind the bathroom door, low and urgent. "Suck it now. Suck harder," he whispered. I froze right there in the hallway, my cotton nightgown hanging loose around my ankles, my heart suddenly pounding like a jackhammer. "Put your mouth right here," I heard him say. I couldn't believe my ears. My son-in-law, my daughter Susan's husband of 15 years, father to my sweet granddaughter Emily. What in God's name was he doing in there at 2 a.m.? I stood there like a statue, hardly daring to breathe. "Push it in deeper. Gotta get deep in there," his voice strained. There were strange sounds, too. Liquid noises, soft moans, spitting. My stomach twisted into knots. This wasn't right. None of it made any sense. Susan was sleeping just down the hall. She'd been working herself to the bone at that rural school, coming home exhausted every night. And here was Richard, her rock for all these years, saying things that made my blood run cold. Let me back up a minute and explain our situation. I'm Dorothy, 67 years old, widow going on 5 years now since my Harold passed from heart failure. I moved in with my daughter's family after selling our house, couldn't manage the upkeep on my own, and my Social Security check of $400 a month doesn't stretch real far these days. We're out on a little 5-acre spread about 20 minutes outside of town. Not much to look at, but it's home. Susan teaches at the elementary school, and Richard used to do handyman work all over the county before. Well, I'm getting ahead of myself. It's coming out. Keep going. Squeeze harder. I heard him grunt through the door. I felt sick to my stomach. My first thought was that he was on the phone with someone, having some kind of encounter. But I didn't hear another voice. Could he be watching something on his phone? My mind went to dark places, wondering if my daughter's marriage was falling apart right under my nose. If you're new here, subscribe now, because this story will leave you speechless. I crept closer to the bathroom door, holding my breath. The light spilled out from underneath, casting a yellow line across the worn hallway carpet. Should I knock? Confront him? What would I even say? "Excuse me, Richard, but what in tarnation are you doing in there?" My hand hovered over the doorknob, trembling like an autumn leaf. But something held me back. What if I was jumping to conclusions? What if there was some explanation I couldn't think of? And if not, did I really want to see whatever was happening on the other side of that door? I backed away, my thirst forgotten, and tiptoed back to my bedroom at the end of the hall. I sat on the edge of my bed, the springs squeaking beneath me, staring into the darkness. Sleep was out of the question now. My mind was racing, playing those words over and over. "Just suck it now. Put your mouth right here. Lord, have mercy." The next few hours dragged by like molasses in January. I watched the red numbers on my alarm clock click forward, minute by painful minute. 2:37, 3:15, 4:02. Outside, an owl hooted, and somewhere in the distance a coyote yapped. Our old house settled and creaked around me like it was sharing my discomfort. I heard the bathroom door open around 3:30, then Richard's heavy footsteps padding back to their bedroom. I must have dozed off eventually, because next thing I knew, sunlight was streaming through my curtains, and I could smell coffee brewing. For a split second, I wondered if I'd dreamed the whole thing. But no, those words were still echoing in my head, clear as crystal. I pulled my old blue robe around me and steeled myself to face the day, to look my son-in-law in the eye across the breakfast table and act like nothing had happened. The kitchen was warm and bright when I came in, so different from the eerie midnight scene. Susan was at the stove, flipping pancakes, her honey blonde hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. Emily sat at the table, head buried in a book like always, absently spooning cereal into her mouth. And there was Richard, hunched over his coffee mug, looking like death warmed over. His face was pale, with a sheen of sweat across his forehead, despite the morning chill. When he shifted in his chair, I noticed him wince. "Morning, Mom," Susan chirped, sliding a plate of pancakes onto the table. "Sleep okay?" Fine, I lied, avoiding Richard's eyes. "Just a little restless." Richard barely looked up. "Pass the sugar, Em," he mumbled to our granddaughter. His hand shook slightly as he spooned sugar into his coffee. I noticed dark circles under his eyes, and he seemed to be favoring his right side. Was he sick? Or was it guilt making him look so rough? I'd known this man for nearly 2 decades, welcomed him into our family, trusted him with my daughter's happiness. Now I was looking at him like a stranger. The morning crawled by, thick with unspoken words. Susan chattered about school, about the spring concert coming up, about Emily's science project. Normal, everyday things that suddenly seemed so fragile. I watched Richard push food around his plate, barely eating. Something was definitely wrong, beyond whatever I'd heard last night. He'd always been a hearty eater, piling his plate high with seconds. Now he looked like he could barely stomach a few bites. As Susan cleared the plates, I saw her place a hand on Richard's shoulder. "You feeling okay, honey? You're awful quiet." He flinched at her touch, then covered it with a forced smile. "Just tired. Didn't sleep great." Their eyes met, and something passed between them. Concern from her, something like shame from him. Susan's hand lingered, and for a moment I could see the love there, the history, everything they'd built together. It made what I'd heard even more confusing, more painful. What was I supposed to do with this? Should I talk to Susan? Confront Richard? Or mind my own business and pray it was all some misunderstanding? The thought of breaking my daughter's heart made me sick. But the thought of saying nothing while something was clearly wrong in her marriage seemed just as bad. That morning stretched on like taffy, everyone going through the motions while I tried to act natural. Susan kissed Richard and Emily goodbye before heading off to school, her beat-up Honda kicking up dust as she drove down our long gravel driveway. Emily caught the bus at the end of the road, backpack stuffed with books. That left just me and Richard alone in the house, something that normally wouldn't bother me one bit, but today had my nerves jumpy as a cat in a thunderstorm. "Think I'll head out to the shed," Richard mumbled, avoiding my eyes. "Got some work to catch up on." He limped toward the back door, each step seeming to cause him pain. His right work boot barely touched the ground, like he was trying not to put weight on that foot. Now, I might be getting up there in years, but I worked as a nursing assistant for nearly 3 decades before retiring. I know what pain looks like when someone's trying to hide it. "Richard," I called after him, "you sure you're all right? That limp seems worse today." He stiffened, hand on the doorknob. "It's nothing, Dorothy. Just twisted my ankle working under the Johnsons' porch last week." Another lie. He hadn't worked a job in nearly 2 months, though Susan didn't know that. He'd been leaving every morning like he was heading to work, but Lord knows where he was really going. Once he was out the door, I busied myself with the dishes, my mind churning over what I'd heard and what I was seeing. Richard had always been proud as a peacock about being the provider, a real old-fashioned man's man who believed it was his job to take care of his family. When he and Susan first got together, I'll admit I had my doubts. She was fresh out of college, him with just a high school diploma and his toolbox. But he proved me wrong year after year, working dawn till dusk, building them a life. I remembered the day he carried Emily home from the hospital, this big burly carpenter with hands rough as sandpaper, cradling that tiny bundle like she was made of glass. The look on his face. Pure wonder mixed with terror. He'd built her crib himself, solid oak that would probably outlast us all. That's the Richard I knew. A good man, a family man. So what in heaven's name had changed? When had the shadows crept into our home? Through the kitchen window, I watched him make his way to the shed, moving like an old man 3 times his age. Something was seriously wrong, and it wasn't just whatever I'd overheard last night. A thought struck me like lightning. What if he was sick? Really sick? Men are notorious for hiding health problems, my Harold included. He'd had chest pains for weeks before his heart attack, but never said a word until he collapsed right there in the living room. I dried my hands on a dish towel and made a decision. While Richard was in the shed, I'd do a little investigating. Not proud of it, but sometimes a grandmother's gotta do what a grandmother's gotta do. I started in the bathroom, where I'd heard those disturbing sounds last night. Everything looked normal at first glance. Towels hung neatly, toothbrushes in their holder. But then I noticed the trash can, fuller than it should have been since I'd emptied it just yesterday. On top were crumpled tissues, nothing unusual there. But when I pushed them aside, yes, I was snooping, and no, I'm not ashamed, I found bunched up gauze pads stained with something dark. Not blood exactly, more like drainage, yellow-brown with streaks of red. My nursing instincts kicked into high gear. This was wound drainage, no doubt about it. And quite a bit of it, too. The bathroom smelled faintly of rubbing alcohol and something else, something sickly sweet that made my nose wrinkle. I recognized that smell from my hospital days. Infection. Under the sink, pushed way back behind the cleaning supplies, I found a plastic bag containing more gauze, some surgical tape, a bottle of hydrogen peroxide, and, my heart sank, a pack of syringes. Not the kind diabetics use for insulin, but bigger ones, the kind used to irrigate wounds. Sweet Jesus, I whispered to myself. The pieces were starting to click together, but I still didn't have the full picture. I carefully replaced everything as I'd found it and continued my search through the house. In their bedroom, I noticed a pile of Richard's socks in the hamper, all with the right one stained with that same yellowish drainage. On his nightstand was a bottle of Tylenol, nearly empty, not strong enough for serious pain, but maybe all he thought he could get away with without raising suspicion. Outside, I could hear Richard moving around in the shed, the occasional clang of tools hitting the workbench. He was out there almost every day lately, but I realized I hadn't seen him finish a single project in weeks. Was he just hiding out there, killing time? When Susan came home that afternoon, I watched her closely. My daughter has always worn her heart on her sleeve, never could hide a thing from me, not since she was knee-high to a grasshopper. Today, her smile seemed forced, the worry lines between her eyebrows deeper than usual. She moved around the kitchen making dinner, checking her phone more often than normal. "Everything okay, honey?" I asked, chopping onions beside her. Oh, yeah." She shrugged, but her eyes didn't meet mine. "Just tired. Middle school drama, you know how it is." "And things with Richard? How are they going?" Her knife paused over the cutting board. "Fine. Why do you ask?" "No reason," I said, trying to sound casual. "Just noticed he seems a little under the weather." Susan sighed, putting down her knife. "He's been different lately. Distant. I don't know if it's work stress or what, but—" She trailed off, blinking back tears. "But what, sweetie?" I pressed gently. "He won't talk to me, Mom." Her voice cracked. "He locks the bathroom door, won't change clothes with me in the room anymore, flinches when I touch him." She wiped a tear with the back of her hand. "I'm starting to think maybe he doesn't want me anymore." My heart broke for her, but I couldn't tell her what I suspected. Not yet, not until I knew more. "Oh, honey, I'm sure that's not it. Men just get in their heads sometimes." "There's something else," she whispered, glancing toward the door to make sure Richard wasn't coming. "I found out last week. I'm pregnant, about 3 months along." Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. "I haven't told him yet. With the way he's been acting, I'm scared, Mom." I wrapped my arms around her, feeling her shoulders shake with silent sobs. My grandbaby was carrying a grandbaby, and instead of being a time of joy, everything was shrouded in secrets and fear. Something had to give, and soon. That night after dinner, I couldn't stop thinking about Susan's revelation. Another baby on the way, Richard acting strange, and those mysterious medical supplies hidden in the bathroom. The pieces were starting to form a picture, but I still couldn't make out the whole image. One thing was crystal clear, though. I needed to figure this out before my daughter's world came crashing down around her. As we washed the dishes together, Susan and I noticed her sneaking glances at Richard. He was sitting at the table helping Emily with her math homework, but even that normal scene seemed off somehow. His face was drawn tight with pain, and every few minutes he'd shift uncomfortably in his chair. When Emily asked a question, it took him longer than usual to respond, like his mind was a million miles away. "Richard," Susan called over, "don't forget we've got parent-teacher conferences tomorrow evening." He looked up, startled. "Tomorrow? I can't make it. Got the Wilson job to finish." Another lie. There was no Wilson job. I'd overheard Susan talking to Mrs. Wilson just last week about how disappointed she was that Richard had canceled on them. "Oh," Susan's face fell, "but you promised Emily. It's important." "I said I can't make it," he snapped, then immediately softened at the hurt look on both their faces. "I'm sorry, Em. Next time, okay, Pumpkin?" Emily nodded, but I could see the disappointment in her eyes. She idolized her daddy, always had. Lately, though, she'd been quieter, watching him with a worried expression that no 12-year-old should have to wear. After Emily went to bed, Richard disappeared into the garage, claiming he needed to organize his tools. Susan curled up on the couch with a book, but I noticed her eyes weren't moving across the page. She was just staring, lost in thought. I puttered around, straightening up the living room, keeping an eye on the garage door. When Richard finally came back in, he headed straight for the bathroom. "Gonna take a shower," he mumbled, not looking at either of us. The moment the bathroom door closed, Susan let out a long breath. "See what I mean?" she whispered to me. "He barely talks to me anymore. Won't look me in the eye. Something's wrong, Mom." I patted her hand. "Why don't you try asking him directly?" "I've tried. He just says everything's fine. He's just tired." She ran a hand through her hair. "I'm scared I don't know, having an affair or something." The thought had crossed my mind too, especially after what I'd heard the night before. But the medical supplies, the wound drainage, the limping, that pointed to something else entirely. "I don't think that's it, honey," I said carefully. "Have you noticed his limp? Maybe he's hurt and doesn't want to worry you." Susan frowned. "He did mention his foot was bothering him a while back. Said he stepped on a nail at the Peterson job, but that was months ago." "Stepped on a nail?" My nursing alarm bells started ringing like crazy. If Richard had a puncture wound on his foot that hadn't healed after months, especially with those signs of infection I'd spotted, this could be serious, deadly serious. "Has he seen a doctor for it?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. Susan shook her head. "You know, Richard, doctors are for sick people, and he's never sick." She rolled her eyes, but I could see the worry behind the gesture. Later that night, I lay awake again, waiting. Sure enough, around 2:30 a.m., I heard Richard's heavy steps in the hallway, followed by the bathroom door closing. I slipped out of bed, my old bones protesting the midnight reconnaissance mission. This time, I was determined to get answers. I crept down the hallway, the floorboards mercifully quiet tonight. From behind the bathroom door came those same disturbing sounds, liquids splashing, a groan of pain, then Richard's voice. "I can't take it anymore. It's too full." I leaned closer, ear practically pressed to the door. "Need to drain it. It's gonna burst." His voice was tight with pain. Then, "Suck harder. Get it all out." The double meaning of his words hit me all at once. Last night, I jumped to the worst conclusion, thinking he was engaged in, well, something inappropriate. But now, with what I'd learned today, those same words took on a completely different meaning. He wasn't talking about anything sexual. He was treating some kind of wound, draining it, and from the sounds of it, doing a poor job on his own. I almost knocked right then, almost demanded he let me in so I could see what he was dealing with. My hand was raised, ready to rap on the door, when I heard Susan's bedroom door open. I ducked into the shadows as she shuffled past, heading toward the kitchen. If she came back this way, she'd hear everything too. My heart pounded as I retreated to my room, leaving Richard to his painful secret treatment. The next morning at breakfast, Richard looked worse than ever. The circles under his eyes were almost black now, his skin clammy. He barely touched his coffee. Susan hovered around him, concern written all over her face. "You're burning up," she said, pressing a hand to his forehead. "I think you've got a fever." Richard pulled away from her touch. "I'm fine, just didn't sleep well." "Maybe you should stay home today," she suggested. "Rest up." "Can't. Johnson needs his deck finished." Another lie to add to the growing pile. After Susan and Emily left, I cornered Richard in the kitchen. "I need to take out the trash," I said pointedly, "including from the bathroom." His head snapped up, eyes wide with alarm. "I'll do it." "No, I insist." I held his gaze steadily. "Richard, I'm not blind or deaf. I know something's wrong." He stared at me for a long moment, then his shoulders sagged in defeat. "Dorothy, please, don't tell Susan. She's got enough on her plate with teaching and Emily." "And the baby?" I asked quietly. Shock registered on his face. "She told you?" "Yesterday. She hasn't told you because she's afraid. Says you've been distant." Richard closed his eyes, pain etched into every line of his face. "I didn't know. God, I didn't know." "What's going on with your foot, Richard? And don't tell me it's nothing, because I know better. I was a nurse, remember?" He wouldn't meet my eyes. "It's nothing I can't handle." "Is that why you're locked in the bathroom at 2 a.m. every night, trying to drain it yourself?" I challenged. His face went pale. "You heard me?" "Honey, I think the whole county heard you. Suck harder. Push it deeper? Do you have any idea what that sounded like?" Despite the seriousness of the situation, I couldn't help but crack a small smile. A flush crept up his neck. "Jesus, Dorothy, it's not what you thought." "I know that now. But what I don't know is why my son-in-law is hiding a serious wound from his wife and treating it himself in the middle of the night. What happened to your foot, Richard? And why won't you get proper help?" He looked away, jaw clenched. I could see him warring with himself, pride battling against the need to finally confess. I waited, patient as a cat at a mouse hole. Sometimes that's all you can do with stubborn men, wait them out. Finally, he sighed. "It started as a blister, 3 months ago, just a small one, on my heel. I didn't think anything of it." I nodded, encouraging him to continue. "But it wouldn't heal. Just kept getting bigger. Then it popped, and—" He swallowed hard. "It's bad, Dorothy. Real bad now." "How bad is real bad, Richard?" I asked, my nursing instincts on high alert. In my experience, when men say something's real bad, it's usually about 10 times worse than they're letting on. He shifted uncomfortably, not meeting my eyes. "It's infected. Has been for a while. I've been cleaning it, putting antibiotic cream on it, but it's not getting better." I pulled out a kitchen chair and sat down across from him. "Show me." "What?" "No, Dorothy, I can handle it." "Richard," I used my no-nonsense grandmother voice, the one that even Emily knows better than to argue with. "Either you show me right now, or I'm telling Susan everything the minute she walks through that door." His face crumpled, and for a moment I thought he might actually cry. This proud, strong man who'd never asked for help a day in his life looked absolutely defeated. Slowly, reluctantly, he bent down and unlaced his right work boot. Even that small movement caused him to wince. "It'll smell," he warned, his voice small. "Son, I changed your daughter's diapers and cleaned up after your father-in-law when he was dying of cancer. I can handle a little smell." He pulled off his boot with a sharp intake of breath, then peeled away a dirty sock that was stuck to his skin with dried fluid. I prepared myself for what I might see, drawing on all my years of nursing experience. But nothing could have prepared me for the reality. The bottom of Richard's foot was a disaster. What had started as a blister had become an open wound nearly 3 inches across, with angry red flesh and yellow-green pus oozing from the center. The edges were dark, necrotic tissue that should have been debrided long ago. The smell hit me like a physical force, that distinctive sickly sweet odor of advanced infection. "Sweet Jesus, Mary, and Joseph," I whispered, my heart sinking. "Richard, this isn't just infected. This is serious. This is sepsis waiting to happen serious." "I know it looks bad," he admitted, still not looking at me. "Bad?" I couldn't keep the shock from my voice. "Richard, this is way beyond bad. This is losing your foot territory. Maybe even losing your life territory." "The doctor said the same thing," he mumbled. I blinked in surprise. "You saw a doctor? When?" "About a month ago. Went to the clinic in Henderson so Susan wouldn't find out. Doctor took one look and started talking about extensive debridement and possible amputation and hospital admission. I panicked and left. Haven't been back." I closed my eyes, trying to process what I was hearing. "So instead of proper treatment, you've been... what? Draining it yourself in our bathroom at 2 a.m.? He nodded miserably. "I bought stuff at the pharmacy, watched some videos online about wound care, thought I could handle it myself. With a pair of tweezers and some cotton balls? Richard, for God's sake, this needs medical attention. Real medical attention." "I can't, Dorothy." His voice cracked. "We can't afford it. The insurance from the Contractors Association lapsed when I couldn't make the payments. And if they amputate, how am I supposed to work? What kind of husband am I if I can't provide? What kind of father?" And there it was, the real wound, deeper than the one on his foot. His pride, his identity as provider, protector, man of the house, all threatened by a tiny blister that had spiraled wildly out of control. "And now Susan's pregnant," he continued, a tear finally escaping to roll down his weathered cheek. "Another mouth to feed, and I can't even take care of the family I've got now." My heart broke for him, it truly did, but my practical nurse's brain was screaming about the danger he was in. "Richard, listen to me. That foot needs proper treatment, and it needs it yesterday. The infection is tracking up your leg. I can see the red lines starting. That's blood poisoning. It can kill you, do you understand?" "Just give me a little more time," he pleaded. "I think it's starting to get better. The drainage has less pus today." It was a lie, and we both knew it. That wound wasn't getting better. It was getting much, much worse. "Richard, I was interrupted by the sound of a car in the driveway. Susan's Honda. We both froze. "She's home early," I hissed. "Quick, get your sock and boot back on." Richard fumbled with the dirty sock, his hands shaking from fever and exhaustion. I helped him, trying not to gag at the smell, then handed him his boot. He had just finished lacing it up when the front door opened. "Hello?" Susan called. "Anybody home? The water main broke at school, so they sent everyone home early." "In the kitchen, honey," I called back, trying to sound normal. "Just having coffee with Richard." Susan appeared in the doorway, her face brightening at the sight of her husband. "Hey, you're home too. I thought you had the Wilson job today." Richard and I exchanged a quick glance. Materials didn't arrive," he lied smoothly. "Figured I'd catch up on some paperwork." Susan came over and kissed the top of his head, then frowned. "You're burning up. Are you sure you're okay?" "Fine, just a little warm in here," he said, avoiding my pointed stare. "Well, since we've all got an unexpected day off, why don't we do something fun? Maybe drive over to the lake? It's been ages since we've had a family day." The look of panic on Richard's face would have been comical in any other situation. Walking was clearly agony for him. A fun day at the lake would be torture. "Actually," I interrupted, I was just telling Richard about Mrs. Patterson's leaky faucet. You remember Mrs. Patterson from church? 92 years old and living all alone since Herbert passed. I told her Richard might be able to fix it today, seeing as his other job fell through. Susan looked disappointed, but nodded. Oh, well, that's nice of you, honey. Maybe another day for the lake. And if you're feeling this story so far, don't forget to subscribe. I've got more real-life stories that'll hit you right in the heart. Richard shot me a grateful look. Shouldn't take more than an hour, he said. Dorothy said she'd come along. Make sure Mrs. Patterson doesn't talk my ear off. That woman can chatter more than a squirrel with a mouthful of nuts, I added with a chuckle. I'll pack you both some lunch then, Susan said, moving toward the refrigerator. As she turned away, I met Richard's eyes across the table. The temporary reprieve wouldn't last long. We needed to talk, really talk, about what happened next. Because I knew, with absolute certainty, that if that foot didn't get proper medical attention soon, we wouldn't be discussing amputation. We'd be planning a funeral. Of course, there was no Mrs. Patterson with a leaky faucet. That was just a story I made up on the spot to buy us some time. As soon as we were alone in my old Buick, bumping down the driveway, I turned to Richard. We need to make a deal, I said firmly. I'll help you with that foot, proper cleaning and dressing changes, not just your middle-of-the-night panic sessions. But if it gets any worse at all, we go to the hospital. No arguments. Deal? Richard stared out the window for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Deal. Little did I know what I was signing up for, or how quickly things would go from bad to worse. I drove us to the Walgreens 2 towns over, just to be safe. No sense risking someone spotting Richard's truck at the local pharmacy and mentioning it to Susan. The whole way there, I peppered him with questions. When did the blister first appear? What had he tried so far? How long had it been draining like that? My mind was in full nursing mode, cataloging symptoms and calculating risks. It started back in January, he explained, wincing as we hit a pothole. I was working that big job over at the Miller place, laying tile all day. New boots weren't broken in yet. Got a blister on my heel, but I didn't think anything of it. And you're diabetic, I said. It wasn't a question. I'd seen the testing strips in their bathroom before, though Richard never talked about it. He looked surprised. How'd you know? Richard, I was a nursing assistant for 30 years. I know the signs, and diabetic foot ulcers are serious business. They don't heal like regular wounds. He sighed, slumping against the passenger door. Type 2, diagnosed 3 years ago. Been managing it with diet and pills, but you haven't been taking your medication regularly, have you? I guessed. His silence was answer enough. And Susan doesn't know about any of this, does she? The diabetes? The foot? None of it? Richard stared out the window at the passing farmland, jaw tight. She knows about the diabetes, not how bad it's gotten, and definitely not about the foot. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, trying to contain my frustration. So let me get this straight. You've been hiding a serious medical condition from your wife, treating a potentially life-threatening infection by yourself, and lying about still having work when you haven't had a job in months. Does that about cover it? When you put it that way, it sounds pretty bad, he admitted. That's because it is bad, Richard, I snapped, then took a deep breath to calm myself. Yelling wouldn't solve anything. What happened with work? That's not like you to just stop. He rubbed his hand across his face, looking every one of his 42 years and then some. Started missing days when the foot got really bad. Couldn't stand for more than an hour without feeling like I was going to pass out. Jobs dried up fast. Word gets around when you're unreliable. He laughed bitterly. Contractor of the year 3 years running, and now I can't even get a call back for a leaky faucet. My heart ached for him. Richard had always defined himself by his work, by providing for his family. I remembered how proud he'd been at that Chamber of Commerce dinner, accepting that silly plaque with Susan beaming beside him. Now here he was, sick, broke, and too ashamed to admit he needed help. What have you been doing all day then? if not working? I asked gently. Driving around mostly. Sitting in the library using their computers to look for jobs. Sometimes just parking somewhere quiet and sleeping in the truck when the pain's real bad. He looked at me with haunted eyes. You can't tell Susan any of this, Dorothy. Promise me. She's got the baby coming now, and with her salary barely covering our mortgage. I don't like keeping secrets from my daughter, I said firmly. But I'll help you with the foot first. Then we'll figure out the rest. At Walgreens, I loaded a basket with proper wound care supplies, sterile saline, proper gauze pads, medical tape, antibiotic ointment, and clean basins for soaking. The bill came to nearly $90, a significant chunk of my monthly Social Security check. Richard noticed and tried to object, but I waved him off. What else was I saving for anyway? A Caribbean cruise? At my age, keeping my family together was vacation enough. Back at the house, Susan had left a note saying she'd gone grocery shopping with Emily. Perfect timing. I led Richard to the bathroom and had him sit on the edge of the tub. This is going to hurt, I warned him, laying out my supplies on a clean towel. And it's going to smell worse than roadkill in August, but we need to get that dead tissue out of there or you'll never heal. Richard nodded grimly, removing his boot and sock with shaking hands. The wound looked even worse in the bright bathroom light, angry red, with that black necrotic tissue around the edges that needed to come out. When's the last time you took your diabetes medication? I asked, washing my hands thoroughly. Ran out about 2 weeks ago, he admitted. Haven't had the money to refill. Lord have mercy. No wonder the infection was going wild. I made a mental note to deal with that problem next. For the next hour, I cleaned that wound as best I could with the tools at hand. Richard gripped the edge of the tub until his knuckles turned white, occasionally letting out a muffled groan when I had to dig deeper to clear the dead tissue. The things I was removing from his foot would have made even seasoned nurses queasy. But finally, I had it cleaned out, treated with antibiotic ointment, and properly dressed. There, I said, sitting back on my heels and stretching my aching back. That's the best I can do without proper medical equipment. But Richard, I want to be crystal clear about something. This is a temporary fix. You need antibiotics, strong ones, IV ones probably, and you need that tissue professionally debrided in a hospital setting. I know, he whispered, looking down at his freshly bandaged foot. But this buys me some time, right? To figure things out before telling Susan? I didn't have the heart to tell him what I truly believed, that he might not have much time left if that infection continued to spread. Instead, I patted his knee and started cleaning up my supplies. We need to get your diabetes medication refilled too, I said. Do you have a prescription with refills left? He nodded. At the Rite Aid in town. But Dorothy, I can't ask you to. You're not asking, I'm offering. I cut him off. Family takes care of family. That's how it works. His eyes filled with tears. I don't deserve you as a mother-in-law. No, you certainly don't, I agreed, but softened it with a smile. You deserve one who'd whack you upside the head for being so dang stubborn, which I still might do, just so you know. That got a small chuckle out of him, the first genuine laugh I'd heard in weeks. It gave me hope that maybe, just maybe, we could find a way through this mess. Later that evening, after Susan and Emily were back, I watched the family dynamics with new eyes. Richard was making a visible effort to engage, asking Emily about her science project, helping Susan put away groceries despite the obvious pain each step caused him. I could see the love there, buried under layers of fear and shame and secrets. Susan kept giving him concerned glances when she thought he wasn't looking, relief mixing with confusion at his sudden change in behavior. As I stood at the sink washing dishes, I caught sight of our reflections in the window. 4 people bound together by love and lies, trying to keep their fragile world from shattering. Susan didn't know about Richard's foot or their financial situation. Richard didn't know about the baby. Emily, bless her heart, probably knew more than all of us realized, but was keeping her own counsel. And me? I was caught in the middle, carrying secrets that weren't mine to tell but could destroy everything if kept too long. Something had to give, and soon. That night, I helped Richard with another wound cleaning after Susan and Emily were asleep. The infection didn't look any better despite our earlier efforts. If anything, the angry red streak seemed to be creeping further up his ankle. His skin felt hot to the touch, his eyes glassy with fever. "You need antibiotics," I told him bluntly, "and not just the over-the-counter ointment kind." "I know," he admitted, his voice weak, "but let me figure out how to tell Susan first. Just give me a few more days." Looking at that wound, I wasn't sure he had a few more days, but I nodded anyway, hoping I wasn't making a terrible mistake. For the next few days, Richard and I fell into a routine. During the day, he'd pretend to go to work, but really, he'd drive around to keep up appearances, sometimes parking at the library to use their computer for job searches. I'd spend the morning tackling regular household chores, all while mentally counting down the hours until Susan and Emily left, giving us the chance for proper wound care. Every evening after dinner, Richard would make up some excuse to turn in early. "Been fighting this bug," he'd tell Susan, or "that Johnson job really took it out of me today." More lies piling up like dirty laundry. Then, in the middle of the night when the house was quiet, he'd slip into the bathroom, and I'd join him for what had become our secret medical procedures. "Try not to move," I instructed on the third night, carefully removing the old dressing. The smell hit me immediately, sweet and putrid, the unmistakable odor of infected flesh. The wound wasn't getting better despite our efforts. The redness had spread further up his ankle, angry red streaks tracking toward his calf, classic signs of advancing infection. "How's it look?" Richard asked, not daring to look himself. I didn't sugarcoat it. "Worse, those red streaks are moving up your leg. That's the infection spreading into your bloodstream, Richard. This is getting dangerous." He closed his eyes, sweat beading on his forehead. "Just clean it the best you can. Please." I filled the basin with warm saline solution and had him soak his foot. The clear liquid immediately turned cloudy with drainage. Next came the hard part, debriding the wound, removing dead tissue to give the healthy flesh a fighting chance. I'd fashioned a makeshift tool from tweezers sterilized in boiling water. "This is going to hurt something awful," I warned, positioning the bathroom light for better visibility. "Bite down on this." I handed him a folded washcloth. Richard nodded, placing the cloth between his teeth. As gently as I could, I began removing the necrotic tissue around the edges of the wound. His whole body tensed, knuckles white as he gripped the edge of the bathtub. Muffled groans escaped around the washcloth. "Suck it now," I instructed, handing him the large syringe I'd filled with saline. This was the part he'd been doing himself before, trying to flush out the deepest part of the wound. He positioned the tip of the syringe and squeezed, wincing as the liquid entered the wound. "Push it deeper," I guided, helping him angle the syringe to reach the tunneling area where infection was burrowing under healthy tissue. "We gotta get deep in there to clean it all out." Now I understood exactly what I'd heard that first night, instructions he'd been giving himself as he attempted this painful procedure alone. What had sounded so inappropriate was actually desperate self-care. A man trying to avoid both medical bills and the shame of admitting how bad things had gotten. "It's coming out," I noted, as pus-filled fluid drained into the basin. "Keep going. Squeeze harder." When we finished, I applied antibiotic ointment and wrapped his foot in clean gauze. Richard was pale and shaking, teeth marks visible in the washcloth he'd been biting. "You're running a fever," I said, laying my hand on his forehead. "I've got some Tylenol in my room." "Thanks, Dorothy," he whispered, voice raspy from holding back cries of pain. "I couldn't do this without you." "You shouldn't be doing it at all," I reminded him. "You need a hospital, antibiotics, proper surgical debridement." I know. Just a few more days. The job market's looking up. Got a lead on the Peterson renovation." Another lie. I'd overheard him on the phone earlier that day. The Peterson job had gone to someone else, but I didn't call him out. The man had suffered enough for one night. As the days passed, our midnight medical sessions continued. I found myself exhausted during the day, catching cat naps when I could. Susan noticed, of course. My daughter doesn't miss much. "Mom, are you feeling okay?" she asked one afternoon as we folded laundry. "You seem tired lately." "Just some insomnia, honey. Happens at my age." "And Richard? He seems—" She searched for the right word. "Better? At least he's talking to me again, even if he still looks awful." That was true. While Richard's physical condition was deteriorating, he'd made efforts to be more present emotionally, perhaps realizing how close he was to losing everything. He'd started helping Emily with homework again, asking Susan about her day. Small steps back toward the husband and father he'd always been. "Men go through phases," I said vaguely. Harold was the same way. Remember that time he didn't speak more than 10 words to anyone for nearly a month? Susan smiled at the memory. "Dad and his moods. I guess Richard's just working through something." "Must be," I agreed, hating the deception but unsure what else to do. The time for truth would come, but first we needed to get that infection under control. One night, about a week into our secret treatments, disaster nearly struck. Richard and I were in the middle of a particularly difficult cleaning session. The wound had developed a deeper pocket that needed flushing out. I was focused intently on the task when we heard footsteps in the hallway. "Mom? Richard?" Susan's voice called sleepily. "Everything okay?" We froze like teenagers caught making out. Richard's foot was in the basin, bloody gauze everywhere, the smell of infection hanging heavy in the small bathroom. "Just a minute, honey," I called, trying to sound casual. "Richard's not feeling well. Think he might have food poisoning. I'm helping him out." "Do you need anything I can—" "No," we both said too quickly. "I mean, we're fine," I recovered. "Just women's stuff, you know. That casserole didn't agree with him. Go back to bed, sweetie. I've got this handled." There was a pause, then. "Okay. Feel better, Richard." Her footsteps retreated back down the hall. We looked at each other, hearts pounding. "That was close," Richard whispered. "Too close," I agreed. "We can't keep doing this, Richard. She's not stupid. She knows something's wrong." "Just a little longer," he pleaded. "The wound's looking better, right?" It wasn't. Despite our best efforts, the infection was winning. The red streaks had reached mid-calf now, and Richard's fever came and went throughout the day. He was taking Tylenol around the clock just to function, and I'd caught him hiding a nasty cough, another sign his body was losing the battle against whatever bacteria had taken hold. I'd also been secretly paying for his diabetes medication, slipping off to the pharmacy when I said I was going to church or getting groceries. Between that and the wound care supplies, my monthly check was stretched thinner than dollar store toilet paper. But what choice did I have? This was family, and in my book, family comes first. The situation came to a head one evening when Emily found me replacing supplies in the bathroom cabinet. "Grandma," she said quietly from the doorway, making me jump. "Is Daddy going to die?" My heart nearly stopped. "What?" "No, honey. What makes you think that?" Her eyes, so much like Susan's, filled with tears. "I heard him crying in the bathroom last night, and he walks funny, like his foot really hurts, and he's so tired all the time. Is he sick like Grandpa was?" Out of the mouths of babes, my 12-year-old granddaughter had figured out what we'd been trying so hard to hide. I sat on the edge of the tub and patted the space beside me. "Come here, sweetheart." She sat, looking small and scared. I put my arm around her thin shoulders. "Your daddy is sick, but not like Grandpa was. He has an infection in his foot that needs proper treatment, but he's being a stubborn old mule about going to the doctor." "Because we don't have money?" she asked perceptively. I blinked in surprise. "What makes you say that?" "I heard Daddy telling you he couldn't pay for his medicine, and Mom's been checking the bank account every day, looking worried." Lord, was there anything this child missed? It's complicated, Em. Your daddy wants to take care of everything himself, be the provider. It's hard for him to ask for help. That's stupid, she said, with the straightforward clarity of youth. When I'm sick, I tell someone. That's what you're supposed to do. I couldn't help but chuckle. You're absolutely right. It is stupid. Think you could tell your daddy that? She shook her head, suddenly looking anxious. Is it a secret? Mom doesn't know, does she? No, she doesn't. But she needs to, Emily, soon. I won't tell, she promised solemnly. But you have to make Daddy better, Grandma. Please? I hugged her tight, wishing I could promise exactly that. I'm trying, sweetheart. I'm trying my very best. By the third week of our secret treatments, I knew we were fighting a losing battle. Despite all my nursing experience and Richard's determination, the infection was winning. The red streaks had climbed higher up his leg, reaching nearly to his knee. His fever was now constant, the Tylenol barely making a dent. Worse, he'd developed a wet, rattling cough that worried me more than anything, a sign the infection might be spreading to his lungs. Richard, I said firmly as I changed his dressing one night, this isn't working. We need to go to the hospital. Now, tonight. He shook his head stubbornly, though the movement seemed to cost him. Just one more week, Dorothy. I've got a line on a big job with the Hendersons. If I can just get that, we'll have enough to start catching up on bills. There won't be any job if you're dead, I snapped, then immediately regretted my harshness when I saw the fear flash across his face. I softened my tone. I'm sorry, but we're way past home treatment. This infection is systemic now. You need IV antibiotics, real debridement, probably surgery. Your body can't fight this alone anymore. The wound itself had changed too. The center was deeper, almost tunneling into his foot, with a thick yellowish discharge that smelled worse each day. The surrounding skin was hot to the touch, tight and shiny. Classic signs of advancing cellulitis, maybe even osteomyelitis, infection of the bone itself. Just a few more days, he pleaded. I need to figure out what to tell Susan, how to explain everything. The truth would be a good start, I suggested, applying fresh gauze. That you've been sick, that you've been worried about money, that you've been trying to handle it yourself, but can't anymore. Richard's eyes filled with tears, how do I tell her I've been lying for months? That I've put my health, our future, at risk because I was too proud to admit I needed help? That I've been using your Social Security money for my medications? That last part surprised me. How did you know about that? I'm not completely out of it, Dorothy. I saw the pharmacy receipts in your purse when I was looking for the car keys. You've been buying my diabetes meds, haven't you? I shrugged, caught red-handed. Family helps family. That's how it works. But your savings are meant to be used when needed, and right now, they're needed. I didn't tell him how dire my own financial situation had become. My checking account was down to double digits, and the property tax bill was coming due. But that was a problem for another day. After he limped back to bed, I stayed up, sitting in the kitchen with a cup of tea gone cold, weighing our dwindling options. The medical supplies were running low. My money was almost gone. Richard was getting sicker by the day. And now Emily knew something was seriously wrong, adding the burden of secrecy to her young shoulders. How had things spiraled so out of control? A simple blister, ignored too long. Pride preventing proper treatment. Lies compounding upon lies until the truth seemed unreachable. I thought about my late husband, Harold, and how he'd hidden his own health problems until it was too late. Men and their stubborn pride. It would be the death of them all. The next morning, Susan cornered me while Richard was in the shower. Mom, what's going on? She demanded, arms crossed over her chest. And don't tell me nothing. I'm not blind. I busied myself with the coffee maker, avoiding her eyes. What do you mean? Richard's sick, really sick. He's lost weight, he's feverish, he can barely walk. And you two are whispering all the time, stopping when I come into the room. Her voice cracked. Is it cancer? Is that what you're hiding from me? No, honey, it's not cancer. At least I could tell her that much truthfully. Then what? Because something is seriously wrong and I'm terrified. She placed a protective hand over her still flat stomach. I need to know what we're facing. I opened my mouth, then closed it. What could I say? The truth wasn't mine to tell, but the lies were eating us alive. You should talk to Richard, I finally said. It's his story to tell. She stared at me, hurt and confusion warring in her eyes. I thought we didn't keep secrets in this family. The words stung because they were true. We'd always been open with each other, the three of us against the world after Harold died. Until now. Sometimes people keep secrets because they're ashamed, I said carefully, not because they don't love you. Before she could respond, Richard appeared in the doorway, his face alarmingly pale. Susan, he said weakly, I think I need to sit down. He took 2 steps into the kitchen, then crumpled to the floor like a marionette with cut strings. Susan screamed, rushing to his side. I was right behind her, nurse mode activating instantly. Richard! Richard! Can you hear me? Susan was patting his cheeks, panic in her voice. I checked his pulse, rapid and thready. His skin burned with fever and his breathing was shallow. When I lifted his pant leg, I saw the red streaks had climbed even higher overnight. Call 911, I told Susan. Tell them we have a man with severe infection, probable sepsis, unresponsive. Sepsis, she echoed, pulling out her phone with shaking hands. What infection? Mom, what's happening? There was no hiding it anymore. He has a diabetic foot ulcer that's gone septic. He's been hiding it, treating it himself because he was worried about the money. We need an ambulance now, Susan. Hurry. As she made the call, I elevated Richard's legs and covered him with a throw blanket from the couch. His eyelids fluttered and he mumbled something incoherent. The infection was affecting his brain now, another dangerous sign. Emily appeared in her pajamas, eyes wide with fear. Is Daddy dying? No, honey, I assured her, praying it wasn't a lie. The ambulance is coming. They'll help him. Those next minutes felt like hours as we waited. Susan kneeling beside Richard, holding his hand and crying silently. Emily pressed against my side, trembling. Finally, we heard the blessed sound of sirens approaching our rural property. The paramedics were efficient and professional, quickly assessing Richard and loading him onto a stretcher. Severe cellulitis, possible sepsis, one told the other as they checked his vitals. Fever 104.2, tachycardic, get an IV started. As they wheeled him toward the ambulance, Richard briefly regained consciousness. Susan, he croaked, reaching for her hand. I'm sorry, so sorry. It's okay, she soothed, though nothing was okay at all. Just get better. That's all that matters now. He didn't have 2 sons. He had 2, maybe more. If you want to hear more stories like this, go ahead and subscribe now. I'll ride with him, Susan told me, wiping tears from her face. Can you bring Emily to the hospital and grab his diabetes medication? I nodded, mentally calculating the fastest route to the county hospital 20 miles away. As the ambulance doors closed and they pulled away, lights flashing but sirens mercifully silent now, Emily tugged at my sleeve. Is Daddy going to be okay now that the doctors know he's sick? She asked, her young face pinched with worry. I hugged her close, my brave, perceptive granddaughter. They'll do everything they can, sweetheart. Your daddy's strong, and now he doesn't have to fight this alone anymore. But as I hustled her to get dressed, grabbing Richard's medication and insurance cards, long expired, I knew, I couldn't shake the fear that we'd waited too long, that his stubborn pride and our complicit silence had cost him dearly, maybe too dearly. In the car, speeding toward the hospital, I gripped the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. Please, God, I whispered, don't let my silence have killed my son-in-law. The next few hours in the hospital waiting room felt like days. Emily dozed off with her head in my lap, exhausted by the emotional storm. Susan alternated between nervous pacing and staring blankly at the daytime talk shows playing on the waiting room TV. I sat still as a statue, my mind replaying every moment of the past few weeks, wondering if I could have done something different, pushed harder, spoken up sooner. Around noon, a doctor in blue scrubs appeared at the doorway. "Family of Richard Cooper?" Susan jumped to her feet. "That's us. I'm his wife." I gently shifted Emily's head onto my purse and joined Susan. The doctor, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a serious expression, led us to a small consultation room. "I'm Dr. Patel, the infectious disease specialist," she said, closing the door behind us. "Your husband is seriously ill, Mrs. Cooper. The infection from his foot has spread throughout his system. We've started him on broad-spectrum IV antibiotics, but we're dealing with a significant case of sepsis." "But you can fix it, right?" Susan asked, a tremor in her voice. "He'll be okay?" Dr. Patel's expression remained carefully neutral. "We're doing everything we can. The wound itself is extensive, what we call a Wagner grade 4 diabetic ulcer. There's significant tissue necrosis extending to bone. We've taken him to surgery to debride the wound and drain the infection." "Surgery?" Susan echoed faintly. "Already?" "We had no choice. The infection was spreading rapidly. He's still in the operating room now." I found my voice, slipping back into my nursing assistant role. "What about amputation? Is that on the table?" Dr. Patel nodded grimly. "It's a possibility we have to consider. The orthopedic surgeon is assessing the bone involvement now. If the infection has compromised the bone significantly, partial amputation may be the safest course." Susan's knees buckled, and I grabbed her arm to steady her. "Amputation," she whispered. "He was so afraid of that. That's why he wouldn't go to the doctor in the first place." "Unfortunately, that's a common reaction," Dr. Patel said. "Many patients, especially men, avoid seeking help until conditions become critical. By then, options become more limited." "When will we know?" I asked. "About whether they'll need to amputate?" "The surgeon will come speak with you when they're finished. It could be another hour or two." She paused, then added gently, "I understand this is overwhelming, but there's something else we need to discuss. Mr. Cooper's diabetes is severely uncontrolled. His blood sugar level was dangerously high when he arrived. Has he been taking his medication regularly?" Susan looked at me, confusion and hurt in her eyes. I stepped in. "He ran out a few weeks ago. Couldn't afford to refill it." "I see," Dr. Patel made a note in her chart. "And how long has he been diabetic?" 3 years, Susan answered, but he said it was mild, that he was managing it with diet. Dr. Patel shook her head. "I'm afraid it's quite advanced. His A1C level suggests poor control for some time. This would have contributed significantly to the wound's development and poor healing." More secrets, more lies. How much hadn't Richard told us? "Is there anything else we should know?" Susan asked, her voice hollow. Dr. Patel hesitated. "Your husband's overall condition suggests he's been unwell for some time. Malnutrition, anemia, elevated liver enzymes. Has he been eating regularly, drinking more than usual?" Susan looked lost. I don't know. He eats dinner with us, but he's been leaving early in the mornings, coming home late. I assumed he was eating lunch at job sites." "There haven't been any job sites," I reminded her gently. "Not for months." Susan pressed her palms against her eyes. "I don't even know my own husband anymore. How did I miss all this?" Dr. Patel touched her arm sympathetically. "Don't blame yourself, Mrs. Cooper. People who are struggling often become very good at hiding it, even from those closest to them." She glanced at her pager as it beeped. "I need to check on another patient. The surgical nurse will update you when there's news. Try to get something to eat if you can. This may be a long day." After she left, Susan turned to me, her face a mask of anguish. "Did you know all of this? How bad his diabetes was?" I shook my head. I knew he had it, and I suspected he wasn't managing it well. but I had no idea how serious things had gotten until I saw his foot. We returned to the waiting room where Emily was now awake, anxiety plain on her young face. "Is Daddy okay?" she asked immediately. Susan sat beside her, pulling her close. "The doctors are helping him right now, sweetie. They're doing everything they can." "Is he going to lose his foot?" Emily asked bluntly. Susan and I exchanged startled looks. "Why would you ask that?" Susan questioned. "I heard you and Grandma talking, and I looked up diabetic foot ulcers on my school iPad." Emily's eyes filled with tears. "It said sometimes they have to cut off your foot if it gets really bad." My heart broke for her, 12 years old and researching her father's condition while we adults were busy keeping secrets. "We don't know yet," Susan answered honestly. "But even if that happens, Daddy will still be Daddy. He'll still be the same person who loves you more than anything in the world." Emily nodded solemnly. "I know. I just want him to get better." "Me too, baby," Susan whispered, kissing the top of her head. "Me too." The next few hours crawled by in agonizing slowness. Friends from Susan's school brought food we couldn't eat and offered help we couldn't articulate needing. Our pastor stopped by, offering prayers and support. Throughout it all, Susan maintained a brave face for Emily, but I could see her crumbling inside, the weight of all these revelations crushing her. Finally, around 4 in the afternoon, a tall man in surgical scrubs approached us. "Cooper family? I'm Dr. Ramirez, the orthopedic surgeon who operated on Richard." We all stood, forming a tight circle as if bracing for impact. "How is he?" Susan asked, her voice barely audible. Dr. Ramirez's expression was serious, but not grim. "He's stable. The infection was extensive, with significant necrosis of the soft tissue and early osteomyelitis, bone infection in the calcaneus, or heel bone." "Did you have to amputate?" I asked directly, feeling Susan tense beside me. A small shake of the head. "Not at this time. We were able to aggressively debride the infected tissue and directly infuse the bone with antibiotics. It was a close call, but we believe we've salvaged the foot for now." The relief that flooded through me was like a physical wave. Susan let out a sob, covering her mouth with her hand. "For now," I repeated, catching the qualification. "The next 48 hours are critical," Dr. Ramirez explained. "If he responds well to the IV antibiotics and there's no further spread of infection, amputation may be avoided entirely." However, his expression turned grave. "I want to be very clear that we're not out of the woods. The infection entered his bloodstream, causing sepsis. That's a life-threatening condition. He's in the ICU, receiving intensive treatment." "But he's alive," Susan whispered, "and he still has his foot." "Yes to both," Dr. Ramirez confirmed, "though his recovery will be lengthy. Even if all goes well, he's looking at weeks of IV antibiotics, possibly months of wound care and physical therapy to regain full function." "When can we see him?" Emily asked in a small voice. Dr. Ramirez smiled at her. "He's in recovery now. Once he's settled in the ICU, they'll allow brief visits, just family and only 2 at a time. He'll be heavily sedated, so don't expect much response." After the surgeon left, Susan collapsed into a chair, emotions finally overflowing. "He's alive," she kept repeating, as if trying to convince herself. "He's alive." I sat beside her, holding her hand. "He's a fighter. Always has been." She looked at me, her eyes red-rimmed but clearer now. "When we can see him, I want you to come with me first, Mom, before I take Emily in. There are things we need to talk about, all 3 of us." I nodded, understanding completely. "No more secrets." "No more secrets," she agreed firmly. "I don't care how bad things are, financial problems, health issues, whatever. From now on, everything is on the table. I can't go through this again." "Your daddy's going to have some explaining to do when he wakes up," I told Emily, trying to lighten the mood a little. She nodded solemnly. "He was being stupid, but I still love him." "That's family for you," I said, putting an arm around each of them. We love each other even when we're being stupid. Maybe especially then. A nurse appeared in the doorway. Mrs. Cooper, your husband is settled in ICU now. You can see him briefly if you'd like. Susan stood, then turned to me. Mom, will you come? I rose, joints creaking in protest after hours in the hard waiting room chair. Of course. Together, we followed the nurse down the sterile hospital corridor, bracing ourselves for whatever came next. Nothing prepares you for seeing someone you love in the ICU. No matter how many times I'd been in hospitals during my nursing career, walking into that room and seeing Richard lying there hit me like a physical blow. He looked shrunken somehow, his robust frame dwarfed by the medical equipment surrounding him. IV poles stood like sentinels around the bed, tubes snaking into both arms. A heart monitor beeped steadily, its green line jumping across the screen. His right foot was heavily bandaged and elevated on pillows, looking massive compared to the rest of him. Susan froze in the doorway, her hand flying to her mouth. "Oh, Richard," she whispered. I placed a steadying hand on her back and guided her forward. "It's okay. All this equipment is helping him. The monitor sounds good, strong, regular beats." We approached the bed slowly. Richard's eyes were closed, his breathing shallow but even. The nurse, a kind-faced woman with salt and pepper hair, checked his IV lines. "You can talk to him," she encouraged. "He's sedated but might be able to hear you. I'll give you a few minutes of privacy." She slipped out, pulling the curtain partway closed behind her. Susan moved to Richard's side, taking his hand carefully around the IV. "Hey, babe," she said softly. "We're here, Mom and me. Emily's waiting outside." His eyelids fluttered but didn't open. A small moan escaped his lips. "You gave us quite a scare," she continued, her voice breaking slightly. "But the doctors say you're going to be okay. They saved your foot, at least for now." At the mention of his foot, Richard's eyes opened slightly, unfocused and cloudy with medication. "Susan?" he croaked, his voice barely audible. "I'm right here," she assured him, squeezing his hand gently. "Just rest. We can talk when you're stronger." His gaze drifted to me, standing on the other side of the bed. "Dorothy, I'm sorry." "Hush now," I said, patting his arm. "Save your strength." "No," he insisted, struggling to form words through the fog of pain medication. "Need to say it. Was stupid. Should have listened." "Yes, you should have," Susan agreed, a hint of steel entering her gentle tone. "But we'll discuss all that later. Right now, you just focus on getting better." His eyes closed again, the brief moment of lucidity fading. "The baby," he murmured. "You're having a baby." Susan's eyes widened in surprise. "You know?" "Heard you talking to Dorothy." His words were becoming more slurred as the medication pulled him back under. Another chance. Be a better man. Within moments, he was unconscious again, his breathing evening out. Susan stood there, tears rolling silently down her cheeks, still holding his limp hand. "He knew," she said wonderingly, "and he still didn't say anything." "He was trying to handle everything himself," I reminded her. "Thought he had to be strong, be the provider, and nearly died because of it." She shook her head, a complicated mix of anger, love, and fear crossing her face. "We're going to have a serious conversation when he's better." The nurse returned, checking Richard's monitors. "He's doing well," she assured us. "His vitals are stable, and the antibiotics are starting to bring down his fever. That's a good sign." "When will he be more awake?" Susan asked. "We'll keep him pretty heavily sedated for the next 24 hours to give his body a chance to rest and start fighting the infection. After that, we'll begin reducing the sedation gradually." We thanked her and stepped out to let Emily have her turn. I walked her in, preparing her for the sight of her father surrounded by medical equipment. To my surprise, she showed none of the hesitation her mother had. "Hi, Daddy," she said matter-of-factly, reaching for his hand. "The doctor's fixed your foot. You need to get better now, okay? Mom's really mad at you, but she'll get over it. Oh, and I got an A on my science project. Ms. Hernandez said my hypothesis was exceptionally well-reasoned." I smiled at her one-sided conversation, delivered as if this were just another family dinner. Children have a remarkable ability to normalize the abnormal, to find footholds of routine in the rockiest terrain. After a few minutes, we rejoined Susan in the hallway. A social worker had found her, and they were deep in discussion about insurance options and financial assistance programs. "Given his lack of coverage and your situation, he should qualify for emergency Medicaid," the social worker was explaining. "I've already started the paperwork, and there are several hospital charity programs that might help with the remainder." Susan nodded numbly, clearly overwhelmed by this new aspect of their crisis. Financial worries on top of medical fears, it was a crushing combination. Back in the waiting room, I took charge. Years of managing household crises had prepared me for moments like this. "Susan, you and Emily should go home. Get some rest. I'll stay with Richard tonight." "I can't leave him," she protested. "You need to take care of yourself and Emily," I insisted. "And that baby. Richard is stable, and they're not going to reduce the sedation until tomorrow anyway. There's nothing you can do here tonight except wear yourself out in an uncomfortable chair." After some persuading, she reluctantly agreed. Our neighbor Angela, who'd come to offer support, volunteered to drive them home since Susan was in no state to be behind the wheel. I promised to call if anything changed and settled in for a night of hospital vigil. The hours crawled by. Every 2 hours the nurses would let me peek in at Richard. His condition remained unchanged, which they assured me was actually good news. No changes meant no deterioration. The antibiotics were doing their work, fighting the infection that had nearly taken him from us. Around 3 a.m., during one of these check-ins, I found myself alone with my son-in-law. In the quiet of the ICU, with only the soft beeping of monitors and the occasional squeak of nurses' shoes in the hallway, I took his hand. "Richard Cooper," I whispered, "don't you dare think about giving up now. My daughter loves you. Emily needs her daddy, and that new baby deserves to know the good man you are, not just hear stories about you." I thought about all the ways this proud, stubborn man had enriched our lives over the years. How he'd been there for Susan when my Harold died, solid as a rock through her grief. How he'd taught Emily to fish, spending endless patient hours untangling her line and baiting her hook. How he'd built that beautiful crib for her with his own 2 hands, sanding every edge until it was silky smooth. "We need you, you big dummy," I told him affectionately. "All of us. So you fight, you hear me? Fight with everything you've got." The next morning, Susan returned early, looking slightly better after a few hours of rest. She brought me a thermos of decent coffee and a change of clothes, both deeply appreciated after my night in the stiff hospital chair. "Any changes?" she asked anxiously. "The night nurse says his white blood cell count is starting to come down. That's a good sign, means his body is fighting back." The day unfolded in the strange timelessness of hospitals. Doctors came and went. Nurses checked vitals and changed IV bags. The infectious disease specialist, Dr. Patel, reported cautious optimism. "The cultures show the antibiotics are appropriate for the type of infection he has. If he continues responding well, we might be able to save the foot." By late afternoon, Richard was showing signs of increased awareness, occasionally opening his eyes and responding to simple questions with nods or squeezes of the hand. The medical team decided to begin gradually reducing his sedation. "He's not out of danger yet," Dr. Patel warned us. "The infection was severe, and we still need to watch for organ complications from the sepsis. But I'm more hopeful today than I was yesterday." Around dinner time, with Emily busy working on homework in the waiting room, Susan and I sat beside Richard's bed. The reduction in sedation had made him more restless, occasionally grimacing or shifting uncomfortably. His eyes fluttered open, more focused than they'd been the previous day. "Susan," he rasped, his voice rough from the breathing tube they'd used during surgery. "I'm right here," she said, immediately at his side. "Mom's here too." He turned his head slightly, taking us both in. Awareness dawned in his eyes, along with the memory of how he'd ended up here. "My foot?" he asked, fear evident in his voice. "Still attached," Susan assured him, though not for lack of trying to lose it, apparently. He closed his eyes briefly, relief washing over his features. "I thought, when they took me to surgery—" "It was close," I told him frankly. "Too close. The doctors had to remove a lot of infected tissue, but they managed to save the foot for now. You're not completely out of the woods yet." "I deserve to lose it," he said quietly. "After everything I hid from you. All the lies." Susan's face hardened slightly. "Yes, you do. But that's not how life works, is it? We don't always get what we deserve, good or bad." She squeezed his hand. "You're getting a second chance here, Richard. We all are." His eyes filled with tears. "I'm so sorry. I didn't want to worry you, didn't want to be a burden." "And how did that work out?" she asked, her voice gentle despite the challenging words. "Nearly dying isn't exactly worry-free." He managed a weak smile. "Not my smartest move." "No, it wasn't," I agreed. "But what matters now is what you learn from it. No more secrets, Richard. No more handling things alone. That's not what family is about." "No more secrets," he promised, his gaze moving from me to Susan. "I'll tell you everything. The money problems, the diabetes, all of it." "We'll face it together," Susan said firmly. "Whatever it is. But you have to promise me, promise us, that you'll never put your pride above your life again. We need you alive, Richard, foot or no foot." It's been 8 months since that terrifying day when Richard collapsed in our kitchen. 8 months of healing, of rebuilding trust, of learning to lean on each other instead of carrying burdens alone. I'm sitting on our front porch swing now, watching the spring sunshine dapple our yard with golden light. Emily's pushing her baby brother in the tire swing Richard hung from the old oak tree last month, his first big project since returning to work. Little Harold James Cooper, named after my late husband and Richard's father, is 4 months old now, all chubby cheeks and bubbly laughter. He came into this world right as his daddy was finding his footing again, both literally and figuratively. Sometimes life has a way of lining things up like that, bringing new beginnings alongside second chances. Richard's recovery wasn't easy, not by a long shot. 3 weeks in the hospital, another month of home health nurses coming daily to administer IV antibiotics. The wound took nearly 5 months to close completely. Physical therapy twice a week to regain strength and mobility in his foot. Some days were dark. The pain, the financial stress, the guilt, all weighing heavy on him. But through it all, one thing remained constant. We faced it together, as a family. The infection had caused some permanent nerve damage. Richard walks with a slight limp now, and he can't stand for as long as he used to. The doctors say it might improve with time or it might not. Either way, he's learned to adapt. "A limp is a small price to pay for being alive," he told me once, watching Emily and the baby play in the yard. "Forgetting to see my kids grow up, that's another change I've noticed. He talks about his feelings now, not all the time, mind you. He's still a man's man in most ways. But the important stuff, the fears and hopes that used to stay locked behind that stubborn pride of his, those find their way out now." Susan went back to teaching when Harold was 3 months old. Richard stays home with the baby most days, picking up carpentry jobs when he can. Small projects he can do at his own pace. It's a complete role reversal from their old life, but they've settled into it better than anyone expected. Turns out, Richard has quite a knack for childcare. That gentle patience he always showed with Emily's homework extends beautifully to midnight feedings and diaper changes. As for me, I'm still right here in my little room off the kitchen, though I've stepped back from being the family fixer. These days, Susan and Richard solve their own problems. Together, like they should. They come to me for advice sometimes, but mostly they come for babysitting, which suits me just fine. There's nothing in this world like rocking my grandson to sleep while Emily reads me her latest school essay. The financial situation was tough for a while. Hospital bills piled up, despite the emergency Medicaid that covered part of Richard's care. For a few months, we weren't sure if we'd keep the house. But then, something unexpected happened. Something that still brings tears to my eyes when I think about it. Word got around town about Richard's situation. Not the whispered gossip kind of word, but the small-town rallying kind. First, it was members from our church bringing casseroles and offering to mow the lawn. Then it was Richard's former clients and contracting buddies organizing a benefit at the VFW hall. Before we knew it, the whole community had stepped up. Bake sales, silent auctions, even Emily's school held a car wash. They raised enough to cover most of the remaining medical bills and keep the mortgage current until Richard could work again. That's when I saw the biggest change in my son-in-law. The man who was too proud to ask for help, who nearly died rather than admit weakness, stood up at that benefit dinner with tears streaming down his face and thanked everyone for saving not just his foot, but his family's future. I always thought being a man meant handling everything myself, he told the crowd. Turns out being a man means knowing when to let your community carry you for a while. There's a wisdom that comes after nearly losing everything, a clarity about what really matters. For Richard, that meant accepting that his worth wasn't tied to being the breadwinner or never showing weakness. For Susan, it meant learning to ask the hard questions instead of assuming everything was fine. And for me? Well, I learned that sometimes helping isn't always helping, that enabling someone's pride can be as dangerous as turning your back entirely. We've made other changes too. Richard's diabetes is properly managed now, with regular doctor visits and careful attention to diet and medication. Susan's put together a family budget that accounts for medical expenses and allows for the lean times when construction work is scarce. They've even started a small emergency fund, just a few dollars here and there, but growing steadily like a seed taking root. Most importantly, there are no more secrets in our family. We have a Sunday night meeting every week, just the 3 adults, where we put everything on the table. Bills, health concerns, work issues, whatever's weighing on our minds. Emily jokingly calls it our grown-up therapy session, and she's not far off. It's not always easy or comfortable, but it's necessary. Like lancing a wound to let the infection drain, sometimes you need to open things up to properly heal. Last month, Richard started volunteering at the community health clinic in town, talking to other men, especially the stubborn old farmers and blue-collar workers, about diabetes management and the importance of seeking medical care. "Don't be a dummy like me," he tells them, showing the scars on his foot. "Your family needs you more than they need your pride." I've heard he's quite convincing. The clinic director says more men have come in for checkups in the past 2 months than in the entire previous year. As for those midnight bathroom sessions that started this whole ordeal? Well now, when I hear "just suck it now" coming from behind a closed door, I know it's probably Richard showing Susan how to use the breast pump so he can handle the 2 a.m. feeding. Life has a sense of humor that way, bringing things full circle with new meanings. This afternoon, Richard's sitting in the yard with little Harold, both of them napping in the sunshine. His wounded foot, still scarred but healing, is propped up on a garden stool. Susan's grading papers on the porch beside me, occasionally glancing up to smile at her family. Emily's starting dinner inside, insisting at 12 and a half that she's old enough to handle the meatloaf recipe herself. I survived the lie, and I found peace. If this story touched you, hit subscribe. Let's keep these real voices alive. "You know what, Mom?" Susan says, setting aside her papers. "I think we're going to be okay." I nod, rocking gently in the swing that Richard repaired last weekend. "More than okay, honey. We're going to be just fine." And that's the real truth about family. Not the pretty picture we try to show the world, not the perfect facade we maintain out of pride. Real family is messy and complicated. It's making terrible mistakes and finding forgiveness. It's falling down and being carried until you can walk again. It's learning that strength isn't about standing alone, but about knowing who to lean on when you can't stand anymore. Richard learned that lesson the hard way. We all did, I suppose. But some lessons, painful as they are, change you for the better. They break you open and rebuild you stronger, like a bone that heals more resilient at the fracture point. As the afternoon sun begins its descent behind the old oak tree, casting long shadows across our yard, I'm filled with a quiet gratitude for second chances, for stubborn men who learn to bend before they break, for daughters who find their strength in crisis, for communities that still know how to be neighbors, for little boys who will grow up knowing it's okay to ask for help, for families that aren't perfect but are perfectly resilient. The words, "just suck it now," will always make me chuckle a bit, remembering that night in the hallway when I jumped to all the wrong conclusions. But they'll also remind me how close we came to losing everything because of secrets and pride. How a simple blister nearly cost a life. How the strongest people aren't those who never need help, but those who learn to accept it with grace. If there's one thing I want you to take from my story, it's this. Don't let pride keep you from reaching out when you're in trouble. Don't let fear of looking weak prevent you from getting the help you need. The people who truly love you don't want your strength. They want your presence. They'd rather have you alive and imperfect than gone and remembered as someone who never needed anyone. Richard Cooper learned that lesson at the edge of disaster. I pray you won't wait that long. Emily's calling us in for dinner now, proud as a peacock about her meatloaf. Richard's scooping up baby Harold, limping slightly as he crosses the yard, but smiling that big sunshine smile that tells me he's at peace with his new normal. Susan's gathering her papers, squeezing my hand as she passes. "Coming, Grandma?" Emily calls from the doorway. "Be right there, sweetheart," I answer, taking one last look at our little piece of heaven, imperfect and wonderful and wholly ours. Yes, indeed, we're going to be just fine. Hello, everyone. Thank you for listening to my family's story today. If it touched your heart in any way, don't forget to take care of your health and your loved ones. Sometimes, the hardest words to say are, "I need help," but those are exactly the ones that can save a life. I'd love to know where you're listening from today. Drop a comment below letting me know what part of the world you're in.